I could read it out to you. Okay. Yes. So, okay, I think there's a question on the chat. For a girl
Yes.
child, should the father or mother initiate the conversation or both?
That's a really good question. Okay, your daughter is 12. So both, I would say. It is important that the opposite sex parent is also aware of the conversation and what we're going to cover so that there is no awkwardness about it. I mean, even internally for a parent, there might be awkwardness, but for the child, the child feels safe that, okay, I can approach either parent and it's cool to talk about this.
Okay. Any other question? Please go ahead quickly so we can make the most of this opportunity. Okay. Anybody wants to unmute and ask can also do that. No problem. Oh, Dr. Atul. Yeah, please go ahead.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Jemima. This was very helpful. I really appreciate all of your input. I'm just having two observations rather than questions. One is how does what you say fits into the biblical understanding of counseling children? But much more than that, I feel that given the shame culture that we live in, uh, how do we deal with the cultural dimension of counseling the children or advising children with regard to sex? Thank you.
I think your voice got cut off in the end.
My second question was we live in a shame culture, and everything that we ask or do is processed through the lens of shame. So, given the very sensitive issue of sex education, how do we deal with that, keeping in mind the culture that we come from?
Okay, so I'll go on what I heard. It got cut off again, but let me just try to rephrase what you asked is based on the fact that our culture is so full of shame. How do we
Yeah,
approach this subject?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that's where parental modeling comes in. So the way the parent responds to this subject, what is the communication like at home in general? Are there certain topics that are shunned? What is the reaction of the parent? Do they keep these topics open or is it something that is hidden? And there can be various reasons for that, right? But it's important for the parent to first look into why is there so much shame around it. It can also be that they're not ready to have this conversation or they haven't had this conversation with their parents when they were kids. So that's where a little bit of getting some information, getting some knowledge, educating oneself as a caregiver might help to deal with this. Sometimes, if there's a case of the parent having experienced sexual abuse or something like that, there might be some elements of shame
Hmm.
also involved in those cases. But what we can do is, of course, every family is different, but we can be proactive instead of reactive, when it comes to these
Yeah.
sensitive topics. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that's helpful. I'm still, and of course, we live in a globalized world now, where everything is accessible for children, even before they enter into teenage, and they probably are much more informed than their parents
Yeah.
in many areas. So it's difficult to handle that, and yet
Yes.
I think this is such an important issue that if not parents, then they would always go to internet or to their friends to get the information. And so, therefore, I was just wondering, even keeping aside the shame culture that we live in, we must be proactive and yet be sensitive to the culture
Yes.
and take care of these concerns. So, but anyway, those are
Right.
good comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think there can be a lot of general questions that come up here, and I think it's important, it's valuable. But if there are parents here and you have something burning on your heart, if you really want to address some issue, please go ahead and ask because then the time will be lost. and we will not be able to answer that. Yeah, we want to finish at 10:30. Okay, so do you think the church addresses this issue and give a proper teaching for our youth, especially the young adults? Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's a very good question. So I know of cases where youth have actually gone and explored things they would not have dared to explore if it had not been brought up in what not to do in the church.
hmm,
So instead of focusing on what you shouldn't be doing, if parents in the church are okay with it and with them on board, if you have a general session on, maybe equipping the parents on how do you go about this topic, that might be a better way to do it. But I do think in general the church does not address it apart from what you shouldn't be doing, as much as focusing on what would be the right way to
yeah,
go about these things.
yeah. So trying to hush hush and put restriction causes the youngsters to rebel and go on in the opposite. It backfires, correct? That kind of thing. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. Any other question? You could send your question anonymously also to a counselor or to me. Yeah. Please go ahead and ask your questions quickly so we don't waste time.
So there is a question on how do you talk about masturbation? The
Hmm.
understanding is that you treat your body as a temple of the Holy Ghost. From a biblical standpoint, would it be considered as a sin? And how do you initiate conversations about this with Gen Z kids? Also, if you have a boy child, would it be appropriate for the mother to engage in such conversations since the father is away? So several different questions. Um, so how do you talk about it is at a very, excuse me, at a very early age, you will notice these exploratory behaviors, which are a normal part of development. What you would do is you wouldn't want to draw too much attention to that and kind of, because the fact is the child is not doing it in a sexual manner. If you look at a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, they're not doing these things out of sexual interest. They're touching themselves and they notice, okay, there's a feeling of pleasure. There's nothing more to it. Like, say, how an adult would view it. So don't get alarmed by it because it is a normal behavior in development. Right. Of course, if you come from a religious perspective, you would view it little differently. Again, you don't want to draw too much attention to it because it would be counterproductive. You might want to gently help them tune their attention elsewhere because it could lead to different kinds of behaviors. So you want to be mindful of that. How would you initiate conversation around this with Gen Z kids? Some example would be if someone has a sibling, they might notice, for instance, that their brother engages in this behavior, a younger sibling, for instance, and they might wonder why they're doing it. So you might want to bring up this conversation that when a child is growing up, he might notice that certain aspects of certain parts of his body feel a certain way, and he might engage in certain behaviors. Again, you don't want to be alarmed by this topic because when kids ask these questions, they ask it quite innocently. There's no sexual intention behind it. If you have a boy child, would it be appropriate for the mother? Yes, I would say it would be appropriate for the mother because you are the other caregiver when the parent, when the father is not around. This wouldn't be a conversation that you would want to give to another family member or relative.
Yeah. One question here: how do I help my son cope up with classmates teasing him about girlfriend constantly? Maybe girlfriend, boyfriend, maybe as if linking him with someone. So, uh, question.
Okay. Okay, so again, it is very normal for children to do that. So you can help them understand that the more you react to it, the more they're going to want to tease you because they're getting fun out of it or they're getting some kind of entertainment out of it. So you can just help them understand that it's perfectly normal. Even if you do like somebody, that's normal because you are developing, you are growing, and there's nothing wrong with it. So if it's not true, then just let it be. If it gets excessive, then maybe just let them know once or twice. But ideally, you don't want to get your child to react too much to it because that's when it gets prolonged.
Okay, right. Any other question? Yeah. One of the thing is when there is a family get-togethers, weddings, uh, uh, a lot of sexual abuse happens in such settings also when there are relatives and all that, and parents are relaxed. So how can parents best prepare? Because I mean, it still comes as a shock that some of the sexual abusers are known people, not unknown people. So how can parents talk to their children and prepare for these things when they go in there? Yeah.
So again, that's a very good question. Most sexual abuse is commonly committed by known people. So while it can be a shock to parents, that's a fact backed by research. This is also one of the reasons you want to start talking to them about this topic much younger, because sexual abuse can be very subtle, especially if you have pedophiles in the picture. It can be a process, it can be progressive grooming, and you might never even know sometimes till your kid is an adult and ends up blurting it out to you. So, beforehand, you want to teach them good touch, bad touch, and they're also taught this in school, I believe, nowadays. If you want, you can take them to a counselor if they find it a little challenging to understand. Show them some videos, discuss about, okay, what have you understood? What are your private parts referring to? The parts that are covered by the swimsuit. In the presence of someone who's not your parent, you don't allow anybody to touch you, touch those private parts. So these are some ways, and you can also use some picture books if you want to help them understand these things. And the other thing I would say is always monitor your child when there is a social setting involved. You don't want them to be
Correct.
without any form of supervision.
Right. Just a question related to this. There is this trend about sleepovers.
Mhm.
Where teenagers, and it's considered we are very modern and we are very open minded. But do you think that's healthy, really? These kind of sleepovers that people practice here?
So I can give you my personal opinion on that. There have been a lot of cases of sleepovers leading to one thing or the other. Sometimes it can be the parent who's in that house who ends up abusing the child. Sometimes it's the case where the kids might get drunk together and then one engages in abusing the other, then they have no memory of it, then there's trauma involved. So there are a lot of horrible scenarios that come out of it. I would say when you're a parent, it is tempting to be permissive beyond a point. You also don't want too many restrictions on your child because being a child is also very challenging these days. But you want to prioritize safety at all times, and that outweighs any other thing, is my personal opinion. So there are some things kids can live with. They can live without a sleepover, but it's much more difficult to live with a case of abuse.
Yeah, and some of the teenagers are so good in playing mental games with parents that you're very narrow-minded and you're a bad parent. And many parents want to show that they are very modern and open, but I think
Yeah.
that's a trap. You should say, I don't care.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
rule. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
that's where boundaries come in. It is important to have boundaries. It's important to negotiate with your child, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable, and there's no harm in letting your kid know that. They'll respect that later on, if not now. Okay, I have
Yeah.
another question.
Yes.
With the rise in single parents raising children alone, how can a mother navigate the talk with her boy child, any age specific, or whenever she notices subtle signs, child is attracted to his mother first? Okay, that's a good question. Yes, sometimes children do say, I want to marry my mother, I want to marry my brother. They may not understand. Like I said, children don't think sexually about these things when they're much younger, because that also happens with puberty, is when they start thinking about things sexually, the hormones start acting up, all of these things. But you always want to start young. So what are the basic things? So you start with, like I mentioned, identifying the body parts appropriately, and then the conversations progress. So it's not something that you start off when they're 13 or when they hit puberty. You want to have age appropriate conversations progressively. It is fine if, perfectly fine if, as a single parent, if you're the only person available to talk with your child about this. However, it's also understandable if your son is little bit awkward about it because you are his mother. If he feels awkward, maybe taking him to a male pediatrician who he might find more comfort with, or a counselor who's a male if he feels personally that he wants to talk to a male. That is something you can look at. Or again, like I said, look at a couple of videos, discuss, is there something that you want to ask me? Is there something, what is your understanding of this? So just be as open as possible.
Right. Yeah. Any other question, friends, quickly? Please put it on the chat or just unmute and ask straight away. Yeah. There is a question I've received. Are there any good books that we can read with children age 7 to 9 about sex?
Okay, so there are different vlogs I can mention. Maybe I can send it across to you, Mr. Abhijit, some of these
Yeah,
resources
sure,
after the
sure.
talk. So,
Right, right. And be in touch with us, and our number and link is right posted earlier. So I'll just post it again. I think related to this was also a question. I was wanting to ask is whether there's any a film on sex education that parents and youth can watch together or something like that. Because just wanted to know about that.
so that would be subjective, again, depending on the age, and each parent would
Right,
find different things appropriate. So what I
right,
will
right.
do is I'll send across a couple of resources, and then maybe parents
You
can
can,
watch and
yeah,
discern what they want to show their kid.
right, right.
Uh,
Okay.
If
Any other
two,
question?
yeah, there is a question. If two students chat on mobile, all indecent stuff, how to talk to them? Okay, so this is a very common scenario that we see. Again, one is to have boundaries in place. So, uh, um, you can talk about. I'm wondering if you're a teacher or a parent, but okay. So you want to first let them know what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. And again, you want to reinforce the boundaries you have set earlier on. You want to understand, okay, where did this come from? What has led to this? And also, what you might define as indecent, your child might not think of as indecent. So you want to allow them to talk about what is going on in their mind. And you also want to reinforce the fact that certain behaviors are not okay, and it's not okay for this age and maybe not in the future as well. So be open about it. It's okay to have standards. There's nothing wrong with having standards and reinforcing appropriate and inappropriate boundaries. And you also want to talk to them about the legalities involved.
Mhm.
So maybe another parent might complain to the school, and then you have all these things. So let them know about the legal frameworks, because we're also seeing cases where you have boys rank all the girls in class and so on, a lot of these things that come up during puberty. So we want them, that's also why we want to discuss puberty related to males and females, regardless of whether you have a son or a daughter, so that they can respect and value the other person also.
Right. Now, any other question, friends, quickly? Let's go ahead and ask, clear our doubts. Unmute and ask, we use Zoom reaction, put it in the chat, open or directly.
I have one question here.
Hmm.
Is it healthy for teenage boys to sleep with the mother, mostly because the child is a single child, sometimes because the child is fearful to sleep alone? So I would say we will have to look at, I mean, if the child is a single child, are there certain emotional reasons that the child is engaging in this behavior? Maybe he is scared of sleeping alone. There are children, even if they're, like I said, we have to look at the development. Is there any neurodevelopmental concern? Sometimes maybe I don't know why what is the background of the family, but depending on the background, there might be certain emotional factors involved also. So you want to see and explore a little bit and then make a decision about how you want to handle it.
Mhm. Is it possible to step by step work out this progress of sleeping separately also for in such cases? Yeah. Any
Okay,
other question? Yeah. Go ahead.
so with regards to what you were asking, I think it would
Yeah,
depend on several things. For example, what is the space like?
right.
How many rooms are involved? Because
Mm,
there are all these
correct, correct.
practical factors also
Right,
that
right,
come
right.
into picture. So, but usually you do want your child sleeping independently. Culturally, there are
Mm,
differences. So in European countries, it's much earlier, even
right.
before 1 year sometimes. But ideally, you don't
Mm,
want it at that age because there is that emotional bonding and secure attachment that needs to be taking place. So I would
yeah.
say at a later stage. So maybe around 6 years is probably
Mm,
good um, a
yeah.
good age.
Age, yeah.
And sometimes there might be some fear also involved, which you need to deal with
Mm,
as well.
right, right. Uh, how do parents scan friendships with teenagers? Because sometimes they're worried that a certain boy or a girl can have some kind of influence, and nowadays it's just so open. It's really hard to make out whether they're friends or get into a relationship. So if parents are worried about some sort of an influence within the colony, boys and girls coming together, then how can they address that without, because at this is the age they're very possessive about their friends as well. Yeah.
So, this is where, building a good relationship with your child earlier on is very useful because you don't have to suddenly worry much during teenage. So it's a good idea to steadily build that relationship earlier on. That's number one. In spite of that, you might have cases where it's very normal for children to prize their peers rather than parents at this age. It's okay for the parent to feel insecure about it. You might feel like you've lost your power over your child a little bit, which is perfectly normal. If you notice that there are certain behaviors that are concerning you with regards to friendship, bring that up with your child, not in a very angry manner, but rather express that concern. What are you concerned about? Express that
Mm,
with your child. The child may not share that concern or understand it because, like I said, their brain is still developing. They're going to view the
mm,
situation differently from you. But again, if it's a matter of safety, then prioritize that safety, reinforce the boundaries. These are the
right,
ground rules that we have. And it's perfectly fine to have ground rules. The problem is when
right.
you don't have them, when you've been permissive
Mm,
all along and suddenly you come up with rules. So,
correct, correct.
so have appropriate rules in place. And this is where also, having some kind of where moral development also helps. If it's just
Right.
rules and rules and they don't have any values they share with you, they won't be able to value any of your suggestions or recommendations. So it's
Absolutely.
important to reinforce the values that you hold, model it to them. They may not
Mm,
appreciate it, that's okay. But you want to make sure that those values are what is guiding them because they're not always going to listen to
mm,
you, you
right,
know.
right.
But
Correct.
teach them how to have friendships. How do I pick a safe friend? What does a safe friend look like? What are
Yes,
friendships that are borderline inappropriate? Right? And
right.
and let them know that even if you end up in one of these, you can come and tell me about it and we'll sort it out.
So, yeah. Any other question, friends? Please go ahead and ask. Put it on the chat or unmute and ask. How safe it is. Okay, go ahead, Doctor, please.
That's all right. I mean, you can carry on, then I'll ask after that.
Yeah, yeah. How safe it is for parents to leave their teenagers home alone for days? Because there have been cases where teenagers, given their hormonal jumping hormones or sex drive, can't handle that freedom well. So, is that something that's advisable? Because there have been cases where parents have gone out for 2, 3 days and or for the whole day, whatever. Can you shed some light on that?
So again, I think sometimes that that scenario might be unavoidable. If there's a single parent involved, there might be a need to head out of the home. But obviously, you don't want to leave any child alone, unsupervised for long periods of time, ideally. But it would also depend from child to child,
Hmm.
right? If there is a case where you have to leave them unsupervised, if you're not around, at least ensure there's someone else checking in from time to time,
Right.
right?
So
And
there have been
that's,
cases, of
yeah.
misusing that freedom through.
Yes, and like I said, as much as you love your child and you trust your child, you also need to understand that this is an age where they do feel pressurized, they do feel like exploring a lot of things, and you know your child best. So don't place them under undue temptation. If you know that they're not going to be able to withstand things, then don't leave
Hmm.
them in that scenario as much as possible.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead, Doctor.
Yeah, this is a little different question, Dr. Jamima. Um, what you have said pertains to children who should be protected from all this child abuse and all that. Also, the parental guidance and all that you provide, which is very, very helpful. But how do you deal with the trauma of those who have, as children, gone through this sexual abuse, and that stigma, that stress, that trauma still remains with them even as adult? Is there any advice that you would give to such people? Because a lot of those are reflected in their lives even as they
Hmm.
raise their own children. And I think as a pastor for almost a decade, I faced some of these issues when parents were already abused. One of the parents were abused, and therefore that also reflects in the way they raise their children.
Absolutely. And actually, trauma within the church based on abuse is not spoken about as much as it should be. It's actually pretty common. And we do have ways of addressing trauma. Of course, there is the spiritual aspects of it also, but also there are people trained in dealing with trauma specifically. And
Yeah.
ideally, you do want to guide these individuals towards trauma informed counselors or therapists will be able to handle it. And it does take a lot of work because it is a very deeply impacting event. For some people, it's multiple traumas also. And like you said, it does impact parenting, it does impact interpersonal relationships, parent-child relationships. So I would say actively encourage anybody you know who's going through this to seek the help that is necessary.
And what role should the church have in such uh, trauma counseling? Because most of the pastors are ill-equipped, and to have a
Hmm.
professional counselor or psychiatrist to assist in the church is not that not easy because it's expensive. What would you suggest as to how should the pastors be equipped and informed about it?
That's a good question. I would suggest if it's about making this kind of training sustainable, what we could look at is something like we're doing here. So maybe at the basics of how you can deal with a case of trauma. At least that can be taught to pastors or church counselors so that they can handle at least some aspects of it, if not all aspects
Right.
of it. So if that kind of a training can be given, then at least you are equipped and not completely ignorant
Correct.
to
Yeah.
whatever
Thank you.
degree possible.
Right. Uh, okay, friends. Any other question? Any other thought? Please go ahead and ask. Or we have a very good
Just to
opportunity
add on to
to.
what
Yes,
Dr.
Marco.
Atul was telling, he was asking about how the pastors should handle this. I would wanted to ask one step ahead of what he asked. How can the church be involved in prevention of these things? Um, so, what are the ways that pastors should be equipped? And not in a highly skilled counselor or a psychologist way, but psychological way, but basic things where the church can speak, the pastors are equipped. So, do you have any such content or suggestion that you would like to suggest?
Yes, so there is a lot of content available online as well from pretty good resources that you can look at, which will give you some knowledge about what are some of the signs, what are some of the behaviors that you might see in someone who's undergone trauma. Trauma, again, can be of various types. So you could look up those resources, educate yourself, but it's again a complex thing to deal with, which does require professional help, I would say. So even if you can get professionals to help you out in whatever way possible, to equip you to, like I said, maybe not to be a full-fledged psychologist, but at least understand what are the requirements. How do you make people who've gone through these things feel safe within that church community? We also know that a lot of times churches fail individuals because they don't maintain confidentiality. So what is said in confidence becomes like something out there in the public domain, and that's like an additional kind of trauma. So there are some basic things that one needs to know. And how do we handle individuals with trauma? What are some other mental health concerns we might see as a result of the trauma? So these are things that one can be informed about without necessarily having full-fledged professional training.
No,
Hmm.
what I meant was, see, one aspect is to address or help the people who have already gone through this. But another aspect is how do you prevent
Prevent.
these things?
Yeah.
So, what is the prevention way that you can
Mm.
really equip the church to handle this? In the sense, the church needs to know all those
Yes.
things. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So it would start at the level of the family, the individual family, because at the end of the day, if a child or anybody else in the family is going through something like this, the first person who should ideally get to know is the caregiver. So you want to ensure that, for example, in a talk like this, similar to this, what are some things you can look for in your child or your teenager that might indicate that the child is going through something of this sort. So, what are some signs to look for? It can also be things like preventive measures, so supervision, letting your child know what kind of touch is appropriate, inappropriate, how to maintain healthy distance. Also, keeping people within the church, maybe having a small unit of people who are maybe supervising events, things like that, communal gatherings, so that we can ensure there's some amount of safety. Other behaviors like, okay, if there is a session, private session going on in the church, then we want at least three people to be there, not just one person dealing with another person. So there are a lot of ways to prevent these things. But number one, we need to look at the age that we're catering to. So if it's younger people, we want to ensure they know what is appropriate and inappropriate behavior, even in the church. So we see a lot of cases where pastors, worship leaders, people might exploit their position, and also there is a lot of emotional connect with these figures. So even with pastors, pastoral counseling, you never know in what way some people get exploited. And there are cases of this readily available in today's news. We know it's happening pretty often. So we want to ensure that we hold people accountable, and we also listen to people who come up with these kind of cases, so that people in church are aware that we take these things seriously. We're not going to brush them under the carpet, which usually tends to be the case.
Hmm.
Sorry, any other question, friends, before we miss out on this opportunity? It's very important we ask this question. If you're thinking about your children or your nephews, nieces, we are concerned, please go ahead and ask. It's very important that we can interact and get some understanding firsthand. And also, some of you friends, if you're from other faith, you've joined. We are so happy you've come. This is essentially a Christian discussion forum, but we open up topics like this to the society, and that's why you have some queries about the church. But we are so happy you've joined. So please go ahead and ask your question to anyone. Yeah.
Pastor Abhijit, I just want to
Yes.
take this time to thank you for finding resource people that are useful for our community. I think over the past year, I've been carefully monitoring your initiatives, and I certainly want to deeply appreciate all of your efforts to encourage and to enhance the understanding of our community. Please keep it up, and thank you, Dr. Jemima, for all your experts' input. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you for your encouragement. We want to build a community, a society, and nation all together. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, any question, please put it on the chat or you could unmute and ask straight away. Go ahead. Yeah. One of the thing is the communication lines between parents and children. It is so important for it to be open and friendly. And a lot of times, parents do not know how to shift gears when children turn into teenagers. So, and also because of this hectic life, a lot of parents are coming home late and they don't have much interaction or friendly interaction. It's often need based conversation. So, how can parents work on improving their friendly communication relationship with their kids so that these conversations about sex can become more open and friendly? So, any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Um, so usually what we observe these days is children don't get enough quality time and attention. So it starts with the basics, you know. It's I understand we live in a challenging world. Both parents are working usually. It gets difficult to find that family time. But the important thing is when you do have time, make sure you keep other distractions away. Don't sit with your phone when your child is talking. Give them full attention and make them feel like whatever they're saying has some kind of interest and value to you. So then they're more likely to come up and ask you things or share whatever they observe or notice in their environment or whatever is bothering them. They need to feel seen, they need to feel heard at the end of the day. So then it's easier if you're anyway having an open line of communication, you've developed that earlier on. And it's not just need based. Okay, so how are you? What did you study? What did you eat? Did you eat? Did you sleep? If it's just those things consistently and nothing beyond that, it's not really going to have much of an impact. And most likely, you're not going to feel comfortable talking to your child about the deeper stuff. So it has to start earlier on. It has to be intentional on part of the parent. Again, there can be a lot of barriers like your own parenting based on, what was the relationship like between you and your parent. So it's not necessary that you continue those things. So whatever wasn't helpful to you, you want to consciously make changes in how you parent your child. Even if you're a really busy parent, take some time off every now and then, go out on maybe a special date with your child, go out on a walk. Doesn't have to be something fancy, but just somewhere where they get that one-to-one attention.
Right. Yeah. Are there some reassuring words that parents need to tell their children from time to time so that children know that, okay, here my parents are there, my support. So, because, just so that the same thing can be underlined or impressed more better. Yeah.
So there is a book that you all might want to refer to. It's by Gary Chapman. It's called Love Languages of Children. So every child prefers different things, Some of them prefer words, like, maybe you notice something that they did. Okay, you did a good job, or I appreciate you sharing this with me. Or I appreciate the fact that it took you a lot of guts to bring this topic up. something like that. Sometimes they might need a lot of physical touch, which helps them feel safe, makes them feel like more regulated. So it depends from child to child. Someone else might like a note in their lunchbox. So you need to really observe your child and look at what are the things they value. They may not come up and tell you that, okay, it's made a big difference in my life, but the small gestures matter a lot, especially when they're going through teenage. They may not seem very interested in you, but don't distance yourself from them at that point in time because they need that emotional support. So you need to look at what best ways does your child respond to different acts, and then maybe make sure you do those rituals every now and then so they feel like you haven't forgotten to keep an eye out for them and you're still there for them. And this goes on at any age, even way past teenage. Children always do love getting their parents' support and attention at the end of the day.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, any other question, friends? Or we wind up? Yeah, please go ahead and ask. This is your time because often we end the meeting and then somebody says, "Oh, I was about to ask and you ended the meeting."
If there are any questions that
Yeah,
anyone wants to still ask more privately, you could share my phone number.
yeah,
That's okay with
yes.
me.
All right, sure. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
there's one question. How do you deal with disrespect from teenagers? Okay. So this is a very common teenage behavior that parents might feel hurtful. Again, you need to also keep in mind, like I mentioned, the child's brain development is not complete. So they will be very reactive at this age. So try not to personalize it. That's number one. Don't take it personally. It's just a behavior that you might see commonly at this age. That's number one. Um, Secondly, when they've cooled down, talk about this with them that, okay, this was not okay. I understand maybe you were upset about something, you were angry about something, but there are ways you can express that other than this. This is not something that I'm willing to accept. But do that once they've cooled down and maybe try to understand the context in which it occurred. Okay, did something happen in school? Did something happen with your peers? Where is this coming from? Usually there is something or the other behind that behavior. Sometimes it also might be they can't show this to their peers, so they come and let it out on you because parents are easy targets and vice versa. So
Yeah.
yeah, don't personalize that is what I would say.
Yeah. Isn't it true also that for children to be able to respect their parents, parents need to be role models and also be able to keep their promises or keep their word because children notice these things, right? When we sometimes forget our promises.
That is true. I mean, children do notice. They notice the subtlest of things. Even when you think they're not noticing, they do pick up on a lot of behaviors, and they might
Mm,
also model these behaviors in return.
correct.
And teenagers especially notice if there is a discrepancy between what you say and what you do. But they also need to understand realistically that a parent is also a human being at the end of the day. It's not possible for them to always keep their word, just like no human can always, maybe there are practical reasons why you might not be able to do something, not intentionally. So maybe have a conversation again, always have that communication open. So if your teenager has a problem with your behavior, don't feel like, okay, who are you to ask me these questions or how dare you ask me? Let them know that, okay, I'm okay with being accountable as well, just like I would like you to be accountable. So
Correct.
if they
Yeah.
do point out something, be honest. So they know that you're also human. You also deal with things.
Mm, right. Right. Yeah. I think some important on the chat. Earlier, somebody said that there is an NGO called ACT, Association for Christian Thoughtfulness, that does training for pastors and lay counselors, and so please make a note of that. And yes, there's a question asked about helping a person who has a sexual orientation. Now, definitely, this question is asked by a Christian from a Christian perspective. Therefore, they are asking about they want a sex change, but how can we help that person? Yeah. So, any comment on that? Yeah.
So, you could refer this person to a Christian counselor who would probably share similar set of values, which
Mhm.
might help them. Because there
Correct.
can
Yeah.
be a lot of reasons that need to be explored here, you know. So
Yes.
doing it in
Yes.
a respectful way in which that
Way.
person feels safe is important. And yeah, I would say
Yeah.
one-on-one sessions would be the best way to go about this.
Right. Okay. And yeah. Yeah, okay. I think with that, we will close today's session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And thanks again, Counselor Jemima Jacob. We are so glad you joined today and took time to very patiently and wonderfully address each question and issue. We really hope that we can once again connect with you on a different topic in the future. Okay. God bless everyone.